Is it true?
Every word.
Every word. Okay.
Yeah, I said cotton swung exactly as I remember her saying it.
Okay.
We did actually hear from somebody who lived in the house in later years, and he was a writer. He had made that room into his study, and he said at first that nothing ever happens in there, but then it suddenly dawned on him. Every time he left the room, he would come back and find that his book was never open exactly where he'd left it. And that again is a true story. So, about the same house. So unexplained, but something was going on for which there's no explanation.
Okay, I look forward to reading your stories as well. Okay. Can we go, thank you very much, Anita. Can we go to Rae McKinlay? Rae, are you there? Are you?
I'm here.
You're here. Okay.
Yes, I'm here.
Rae McKinlay, all the way from
Ballydehob. Yes. Oh, okay. Where do I start with this? I think this story is appropriate for tonight because I'm a great believer that stories whisper to you. And there's some stories I cannot tell because I'm not allowed to tell the story. So this is quite a kind of sad night too for me because I'm giving the oral storytelling a bit of a break because this story has been really banging on my head for a long time. And here is the scary part. And Peter, I'm glad you're here because it doesn't sound so really weird. The story is in memory of a woman or a girl called Gillis. And it is a true story. Well, she actually did live, but I'm still researching her, but I feel this story would go more better visually. So I'm going to attempt the visual story. But anyway, I have spoken enough. Here is the story. And please excuse me, it's kind of building up in me, okay? I got it. Once a great blackness, creeping blackness covered the landscape. The wind no longer whispered stories, and the woman had fallen silent. The town was grey and stern. No one dared to believe in magic. There was no aroma of spice, fruit, herbs to tease the senses. No cooking on the Sabbath. Gillis ought to have been at home, but her whole body ached to be in the presence of trees, in the company of squirrels with their bright button eyes. Oh, she lamented that one day that she would be muzzled and reined by feminine decorum. The petticoat that would scratch and hinder, and the shoes that would pinch her toes. The November chill nipped her fingers. There was no moon to be seen. Perhaps she too was afraid, shivering behind the clouds. As her feet crunched on the hard cobbled stones, every fallen leaf rustled warning of danger. But Gillis was not afraid of the ghostly shapes and shadows which lurked in the mist and tricked one's eyes. No, she was more afraid of the lying eyes peering covertly from nooks and crannies, their venomous tongues that would utter accusation. As the mist curled round her and weaved its own special magic, Gillis was not lost to the voices of her kindred sisters, the healer, the wise woman, the storyteller, crying out for justice. Their screams screeched the night, their tears blew in the wind. And oh, she remembered when skies burned red and the stench of sulphur and skin hovered all around. Then Gillis sensed someone's breath against her ear. And when she turned around, there was no one there. A slither of cold slid down her spine, but she convinced herself it was naught but the sudden cold. Oh, how it was going to be a long, endless, and loathsome night. Then it was the heavy, pounding footsteps that stirred her. The sound became louder, then softer, then louder. In a moment, the sound became from all directions and encircled her. Fear fell upon her, and she increased her speed. Then, in the shadows, by the old tavern, he stood. Unspoken words, menacing eyes, his power gaining in his strength over her. He moved towards her, and his huge, clammy hand grabbed her ebony hair. The dank, foul smell of his breath suffocated her. But at that moment, she sensed the collective rage and strength of her kindred sisters. And she struck him hard with her knee. The sound of her footsteps echoed hollow back as she raced down the wind. But I asked you this: where do you go when you have nowhere to go, when there's nowhere to run? Webs of stretchy, stringy sheets of hair of ancient hags hung like a tapestry along the trees when she staggered into the forest. However, there was a mournful hush. The venerable oak had gone, and Gillis was met with the sight of a stump and the skeletal remains of branches. Weary and wounded, she dropped to her knees Now, the wound may only be emotional, but we all know emotional wounds cut like a knife. And her tears watered the soil. It was too much for her. She stumbled forward and collapsed to the ground. And when her eyes popped open, she was greeted by the most clearest and softest of blue eyes. But the face was lined and the skin stretched back. Her long, straggly hair hung loose over her shoulders. She was a tall, gangly woman, wrapped in mid-grey cloak. But the warmth and the taste of the broth, red juicy carrots and white tangy parsnip, nourished her feeble soul. The old woman covered Gellis and said, "You'll be fine here for the night, Hen." But at that moment, the last gasp, the final breath, the overarching howl of the wolf in his lament of the end of an era. Both women bowed their head in reverence. On a dark winter's night, at the close of midnight, two women, one old, one young, sat in the forest. They had both lived to see the end of the wolf, the beginning and the end of the forest, and they knew that their time may be limited, but they also knew deep in their heart that their stories would not be buried beneath the stones, that one day that the story will rise and soar as if on wings of eagles. For the woman with the wild hair who dare to sing and to dance. Sinead.
Thank you very much, Rae.
Thank you.
Well done, Rae. You've muted yourself again.
Maria, I thanked Rae, and I wasn't unmuted. Thank you very much, Rae, for another spellbinding tale.
Yes.
And can I ask Maria to take the floor?
I'm on show and I'm ready. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well,
I love this little session, so, and so important now, I loved hearing Nuala's poems, and I've been traveling in the cyber world telling stories, and I would recommend it to everybody, and maybe to have to invite as well, Mose, to invite people back, because they love coming back now as well, so I think we're still in the season of Samhain, and I'm going to tell a Samhain story that came to me during one of those sessions. I think I got muted there, so I unmuted myself. So this story came when I was attending a session in Cyber Liverpool. These days, nobody believes in anything, for God's sake, and the electric lights, they burn all night, turning night into day, taking away all the traditions. Sure, if you heard Anita Howard's story in the full of a bright, shining sun, it wouldn't affect you at all, like it affects us now, sitting in our little houses, insulated in the dark of Samhain. There is something delicious about sitting next to the flickering fire, listening to the cracks, and going back in time to when people believed in the stories. Mihal's mother followed him out to the door. He was heading off to his job, pulling an all-nighter. He was going to work 12-hour shift. It was the year 2020. It was coming up to Samhain, and you could leave your house if it was work-related. As he was going out the door, she said, "Oh God, boy, there's a big blue moon in the sky tonight. It's shining down. The veil is thinning. Be careful what you might see. The mists of Samhain are thickening me all. Be careful, boy. Be careful. Do you have to go out to work tonight?" And he said, "For God's sake, ma'am," calling over his shoulder, "will you stop putting on a show for the neighbours?" And off he went into that thickening mist, into the mists of Samhain that were curling up out of the lee and making in a meandering way their little strides through the city of Cork. He came down from the top of one of the hills of Mayfield, down towards Collins's barracks, that place with its limestone walls. Oh, it could tell of ghosts and of wrongs done and of unacknowledged spirits. He passed it with his hand up to his face, believing with every step more and more of what his mother had called after him. And when he reached Bellsfield, the thickening mists of Samhain were weaving their magic. Forms were coalescing and disappearing and coalescing there, and he tried not to look. But then a face came out of the mist. It got more solid than yours or mine, and he could not look away. It had hollowed out cheeks and the saddest eyes he'd ever seen. Without words, this spirit invited him to look down, and he saw that there was a box in this spirit's hand, a little butter box. Without being asked, he lifted the cloth on a corner of the box, and inside he saw the reason for the sorrow in that man's eyes. For there was a baby, a little baby that had never had a chance, that hadn't enough nourishment to cling to life in this world. Oh, the sorrow. It felt like a weight. And without thinking, Michal invited him to put the box down on the back of his bicycle. The man left it go like it was a great weight, although Michael couldn't believe that it would have weighed too much. And then he walked down the Fever Hospital steps, and Michal, because he did not know what else to do, fell into step behind him. They kept the funeral pace all the way down the Fever Hospital steps. And at the end, he followed this spirit behind Murphy's Brewery, down along the narrow little alleyway there, until they came to another set of ancient steps. He turned right, and they made their way up, and they came to Shandon, and turned left at the top of Shandon Street. But it wasn't like any Shandon Street he remembered. Where were the electric lights? And there wasn't one car, not one to be seen. They made their way down Shandon Street, almost to the very end, and then turned left. There was a graveyard there, and Michal remembered his mother saying something about St. Anne's graveyard being tarred over so that they could make a car park. It was no car park now, but the old graveyard. The spirit was busy, looking here and there for something, Michal didn't know what, and then he found it, a fresh grave. He went to the end of the grave and with his eyes called Michal to come forth. Michal came. The man dug at the end of the fresh grave with his bare hands, and Michal noticed that the knuckles were gnarled and the fingers were dirty. Then he put up his hand for the precious cargo, and Michal put the little butter box into his hands. He buried it then and looked at Michal and sang the old song. Air na hir, atá nav, go never danam, go dagaduriat. And Michal answered him, surprising himself that he still remembered those ancient words. And then he covered it up as if he was placing soft blankets. The gratitude in his eyes did something to Michal's own heart. He felt a deep respect and a deep fear. What was going to happen next? The Samhain mists of the Lee got thicker and thicker, and the face disappeared behind them. Michal took his bicycle and ran like hell out of there and down the hill towards the River Lee, where the mists were receding back into the waters themselves. And then he saw it, the lights of a bus, and he heard it, the bustle of a city. And never again did he mock his mother when she said the veil thins when Samhain comes.
Maria. Brilliant.
You're muted, Rosa.
Maria, thank you very much. It was really brilliant. And I was trying to find you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Oh, you're here. Okay. That's also
I'm here, yeah.
disconcerting. People disappearing on Zoom. A while ago, we talked about are you giving storytelling workshops at all?
Yeah, so I'm doing some story circles, and I've been, I've been performing at some festivals on the world stage. So my next one is in the US, and we're having our tech night on Sunday. And I'm going to be on the World Storytelling Cafe soon. And of course, I'm at Cork Yarn Spinners fairly frequently as well. And there's a few sessions that I think DeBarros would really get on well with. And that would be Bards Aloud in Ipswich and Maria Wattens in Liverpool, which is also on a Wednesday, And I've been exploring with some of the museums, putting our fingerprint on history with these stories. So we had a session with Scotland and Wales, and Kerry Writers Museum are doing some interesting things. So I'll keep you updated.
Yeah. Really good. Okay. And anything you post, we'll share. Thank you very much, Maria. Honored to have you here.